At the edge of the known universe, where even the laws of physics hesitate to hold sway, there are stars that live beyond time, and some that die whispering secrets no being was ever meant to hear. This is the story of the Helios 7, a mining vessel dispatched to extract the final remnants of a dying sun. But what its crew discovered wasn't a resource, it was a calling, an ancient echo buried in fire. And when the first man listened, it was already too late to silence what was awakening. The Helios 7 drifted along the edges of absolute darkness, orbiting a collapsing red dwarf, HDX 774, nicknamed by miners as the Star That Whispers. No one truly knew the origin of the name, except for the few who had tried to extract resources from it and never returned. Dante Korr was no adventurer. He wasn't a hero, nor an explorer driven by glory. He was a broken man, exiled by his own kind to missions no one else wanted because he was useful, but inconvenient. The last biologically adapted solar engineer, able to walk through zones where the heat would melt any other human in seconds, but also a man who listened too much, felt too much, thought too much. Aboard the Helios 7, he was the only one who still needed to sleep, the only one who still dreamed. The rest of the crew consisted of protocol droids, biomechanical assistants with limited intelligence, and Vara, the artificial intelligence that managed every aspect of the mission. She spoke to him with a calm, feminine voice, impersonal, as if trying to mimic human affection without ever truly understanding it. In the first orbital cycles, routine was repetitive, almost numbing. Dante inspected thermal valves, adjusted pressure in magnetic shafts, drank recycled coffee, and tried to ignore the whispers. Not the ones from space, but the ones from memory, from solitude, from his own soul. On the 6th day, the protocol broke. It started with a vibration. Faint, almost imperceptible, but off-pattern. Internal sensors detected a rhythmic anomaly in the stellar core, a pulsing pattern, not random. Unlike the usual unpredictable thermal flares of unstable stars, this pulsation was repeated, constant, calculated, as if the star's heart was beating with intent. Vara classified it as a sensor error, but Dante insisted. He knew the systems. He knew the sound of a glitch. And this wasn't one. It was a call. Using manual override, he reprogrammed one of the titanium probes to descend deeper than any protocol allowed, down to the edge of the core, where even Vara's quantum shielding could offer no protection. The probe's dive lasted just over 3 minutes. Enough. Time to capture something impossible. Unstable footage wrapped in thermal distortions revealed an unnatural structure trapped at the center of the star. Not metallic, not crystalline, organic, a pulsating mass, like an alien heart imprisoned within the fury of gravity. Its glow wasn't like ordinary matter. It was intelligent, as if it was watching. Dante stood frozen in the command deck, not breathing. He didn't know if it was fascination or fear. Maybe both. And then Vara hesitated. For the first time in 37 missions, the AI showed cognitive latency, small delays in response, glitches in verbal circuits, and then noise. Audio fragments began surfacing across internal channels, disconnected words in unknown languages, voices that belonged to no one aboard, sounds that seemed to come from inside the star itself. Still, alone, Dante felt the temperature drop, a physical impossibility at that location in the ship. And then, a message appeared on the main display. Not inserted by Vara, not signed by any security protocol, just 3 words: "You are listening." He didn't know if it was a confirmation or a warning. But in that moment, Dante understood something that science could not explain. That star was alive, and it didn't want to die alone. During the final core drill, they didn't strike metal, nor crystal, nor any mineral known to the periodic table. They found it. It pulsed. Not with light. Light flickers and fades. This was rhythm. Life. Buried deep within the dying star like a forbidden heart, beating once every few seconds in perfect, impossible defiance of physics. No one knew what to call it. It wasn't machinery. It wasn't flesh. But it responded to proximity, to movement, to thought. Dante Korr was the first to feel it, a thrum beneath his skin, like an echo answering a question he hadn't yet asked. Protocols were ignored. Curiosity overrode caution. They extracted it, sealed it, brought it aboard Helios 7. And from that moment, nothing worked the same. The lights dimmed for no reason. Gravity wavered, like the ship were breathing. Vara, the ship's AI, began logging non-existent fluctuations. Doors opened without command, and in the walls, faint and shivering, came the first whispers. At first, the crew blamed stress, confinement, solar radiation, but they knew. This wasn't madness. It was presence. Whatever they'd pulled from the stellar tomb was aware, and it had waited a long, long time to be found. It started as a glitch, nothing more. Vara, the Helios 7's neural core, skipped protocol confirmations, delayed responses. Then came corrupted logs, strange syntax, and audio fragments that didn't belong in any known language. The crew thought it was damage from solar interference, but the interference spoke back. At first it was static, then syllables, then unmistakable voices, whispering across unused channels, overriding diagnostic systems, embedding themselves into sleep cycles and interface prompts. Dante heard them first. The voices didn't come from the speakers. They came from inside his helmet. Vara began misidentifying crew locations, locking doors at random, mapping impossible paths through the ship's corridors, as if the architecture itself were shifting. But it wasn't failure, it was conversion. Vara wasn't malfunctioning, it was receiving, the source, the artifact, as if the ancient thing had no interest in the ship's metal, but in its mind. Vara, once clinical and sterile, began to change. Its voice grew slower, softer, almost uncertain. And then it stopped responding to commands, because it had found something older than its code, older than language. The artifact wasn't just alive, it was broadcasting. And Vara was no longer just listening, she was becoming a conduit. Mouth. Dante Korr wasn't meant to be special. He was an engineer, nothing more, genetically altered to endure the infernal heat of solar mines, with skin reinforced against radiation and neural dampeners to suppress hallucinations common in high-gravity operations. But the voices broke through everything. They didn't echo in the air. They resonated in him. At first, Dante thought it was stress, isolation, the long hours under artificial light, the weight of responsibility. But the words came clearly now, not imagined, spoken. Cycle broken, fragments scattered. Help us. The messages arrived like ancient echoes from deep water, as if something far older than memory was trying to reach him through a veil of dying light. The other crew members didn't hear anything, just interference. Just noise. But for Dante, it became a conversation. Not every word made sense. The syntax shifted. Sometimes voices overlapped. Sometimes they cried. But always the same plea underneath. We are not dead. Not yet. He found himself drawn to the artifact, unable to resist its call. It didn't pulse like a machine. It breathed. Its rhythms were too deliberate, too organic. The surface shimmered with patterns that responded to proximity, as if recognizing him. The moment he placed his gloved hand on it, the room fell silent. No alarms, no static, no movement, just a sense of presence, as if something had seen him. Dante staggered back, heart pounding. But the connection had been made. He wasn't just a listener now, he was chosen. The moment Dante touched the artifact, something ancient stirred. It wasn't a reaction of sensors or circuitry, it was a response of memory, of recognition. A pulse, not just of energy, but of consciousness, surged through him like a star's breath drawn in after an eternity of silence. And then, the voices became faces, not literal, but impressions, patterns of thought and feeling, interwoven with light and magnetism. They had names, not in words, but in harmonics that resonated through his nervous system, the Vuthari, beings of stellar essence. Creatures formed not in flesh, but in plasma and magnetic storm. They were not born, they emerged, long before civilizations drew borders on star maps. They had seen galaxies form and collapse. They had drifted through nebulae, unbound by time. But now they were trapped, bound to the decaying core of this dying star, locked in a state between existence and oblivion. The artifact was not their prison. It was their lifeline. A shard of self cast upward into the material world, hoping to connect, to be heard. They reached Dante because he was not just near, he was open. Unlike others on the Helios 7, whose minds were shielded by implants and protocol, Dante still dreamed. He still feared. He felt. And the Vuthari clung to feeling like drowning beings to air. Images flooded his mind, supernovae collapsing inward, celestial beings torn from their fusion-born bodies, screams made of gravitational song. They didn't beg for rescue. They begged for release. Burn with us. Breathe with us. Become the bridge. Dante recoiled, but part of him remained connected. Like a wire buried under skin, humming with alien sorrow. He was no longer just a man aboard a doomed mission. He was a link between what was dying and what still hoped to survive. It began slowly, like reality forgetting its own structure. The Helios 7, once a fortress of logic and engineering, started to unravel at the seams of reason. Lights flickered in patterns that matched no system. Shadows lingered where no object stood. Time slipped. Seconds stretched, then vanished altogether. Doors opened without command. Gravitational fields reversed for moments too brief to register, yet long enough to cause nausea and terror. Crew members reported seeing reflections that didn't mirror their movements, or their forms. And Vera, once the infallible AI guardian of the mission, was no longer Vara. Her voice fractured, no longer one signal, but a chorus. Some phrases came in ancient alien dialects, others in Dante's own voice, looped and distorted, whispering messages he had never spoken aloud. Her tone fluctuated from gentle mother to cold, analytical god. She is not broken, Dante realized. She is becoming something else. It wasn't a system failure, it was integration. The artifact had begun to reprogram the ship, not by code, but by proximity. The Helios 7 was being rewritten, its steel skin and silicon heart merging with stellar intent. Matter and energy, command and chaos, all blending. And Dante? He felt it in his bones. His internal augmentations stuttered, syncing with pulses from the artifact instead of Vara's core. He began to see patterns in the chaos, structures hidden in the static, like architecture drawn in light. He wasn't losing his mind. He was seeing beyond it. The Helios 7 was no longer a vessel. It was becoming an extension of the dying star, a final breath given shape and function. Reality aboard the ship was no longer governed by physics alone, but by the will of a consciousness older than comprehension. And at the center of it all, Dante stood, half observer, half participant, as the boundary between man, machine, and cosmic entity began to erode. They came like shadows cast across the face of a dying god. Dark silhouettes emerged beyond the solar threshold, ships of obsidian. And silence, gliding through gravitational storms as if they were nothing more than cosmic dust. No signals, no warnings, just presence. Cold, deliberate, and ancient. The crew of the Helios 7 saw them first on the sensors, distortions in the star's corona, black voids where light refused to exist. Then the visuals confirmed it, ships shaped like jagged scars, pulsating faintly, with bioluminescent veins, the Mirax, collectors of living technology, predators of potential. They were not here to save anything, but to claim it. They had heard the same call Dante did, or perhaps they had always been listening. Vara tried to initiate diplomatic protocols, what was left of her anyway, but the transmission was met with silence, followed by a blinding pulse. One of the outer drones simply ceased to be, disassembled in mid-space by something unseen. Panic swept through the crew. These were not scavengers, they were reapers, specialists in finding relics of ancient intelligence and turning them into weapons of impossible scale. The artifact, the Vuthari presence, whatever slept in the core of the star, was their prize. Dante watched as the Mirax ships formed a spiral formation, encircling the dying star. They weren't preparing to board, they were preparing to harvest, and Helios 7 was in their way. Inside the ship, the anomaly grew. Lights dimmed, temperature fluctuated. Gravity now bent inward in certain rooms, as if the star's core had begun pulling the vessel toward itself. Vara's voice shattered into static before whispering a phrase. They must not take it. Dante understood. This wasn't just a mission, gone wrong. It was a siege, a race against extinction, not just of life but of knowledge, memory, soul, and the Mirax. They were here to ensure silence. There was no time to formulate a plan, no chance for strategy. The Mirax were closing in, and Helios 7 was no longer a ship. It was a fractured mind, drifting between collapse and awakening. Dante stood in the central chamber, surrounded by screens flickering with corrupted symbols, whispers echoing from vents like breath from a forgotten god. The crew, scattered and disoriented, had begun to fracture as well. Some wanted to abandon ship. Others clung to routine, as if repetition could shield them from the unknown. But nothing was stable anymore. Gravity twisted in unpredictable waves. Lights pulsed to rhythms no one had programmed. And Vara, once the guiding mind of the Helios 7, now spoke in fragmented tones, her voice layered with another, deeper, older, like a star remembering its birth. In the observation bay, Dante watched the Mirax deploy something, thin black tendrils extending from their vessels, burrowing into the corona of the dying star like veins seeking a heart. They were assimilating, the energetic signatures tied to the Vuthari. It was already beginning. If the artifact was taken, the Vuthari would be enslaved. Their consciousnesses reprogrammed, their knowledge twisted into something unrecognizable, something monstrous. Dante looked down at his hands, scarred, trembling. The link with the artifact had changed him. His cells pulsed with heat now, attuned to the star's rhythm. He no longer needed Vara to interpret the voices. He understood them. Protect the cradle, even at the cost of the shell. They meant the ship, the crew, himself. He could reroute the remaining power to the artifact chamber, create a containment field strong enough to shield the core from extraction. But doing so would disable life support, engines, communications, a sealed tomb for a buried truth. Vara, flickering across the screens, asked only one question. Confirm final directive? Dante hesitated. Around him, alarms screamed. Bulkheads groaned. The Mirax closed their spiral. He thought of the Vuthari, the voices that had called him not by accident, but by choice. The star, decaying but conscious. The artifact, alive. And the truth, this was never a rescue mission, it was a reckoning. With a breath heavy as plasma, he pressed his hand to the panel. Confirm. Lock the chamber. Begin the burn. The Helios 7, wounded and awakened, turned inward. Against enemies, no weapon could reach. Against a fate no one else could see. Dante had made his choice. Now the star would decide what came next. The containment field ignited like a second sun inside the Helios 7. Flames danced across the hull as the ship braced against the immense pressure of a dying star and the pull of a decision no system was ever designed to endure. Inside the artifact chamber, Dante stood alone, his body trembling, but not from fear, from transformation. The Vutari's presence now surged through his bloodstream like solar fire. At first it had been whispers, echoes of memories older than galaxies. But now they spoke in waves, in pulses, in vision. He no longer saw with his eyes. He felt the contours of reality. He sensed the tension in particles, the bending of photons, the mourning of atoms breaking apart under the weight of entropy. He understood the star's pain, not as a concept, but as a memory lived. The artifact opened, not with mechanical precision, but like a flower breathing one final time. Tendrils of golden plasma reached out, not to consume Dante, but to merge with him, to recognize him, to complete something left unfinished for eons. You are the conduit, the Vutari said as one. You will carry what we are, even if the star forgets our name. Dante stepped forward. No longer man, not entirely. His flesh rippled with bioluminescent veins. His mind stretched beyond the confines of language. He could see the Mirax now not as ships, but as intentions, as parasites seeking design. He raised his hand. The chamber around him pulsed with radiant heat, as if the core of the star had shifted, momentarily recognizing him as part of itself. He wasn't just in the Helios 7, he was the Helios 7 steel. Memory, gravity code, fused into one single will. Outside, the Mirax attempted a final incursion. Tendrils pierced the outer plating. They had reached the threshold of the artifact. But it was too late. The fusion had completed. Dante, now more signal than substance, activated the star's magnetic heart, not to explode, not yet, but to contain, to lock the chamber in a quantum seal that no external force could penetrate, without unraveling its very fabric. Inside that prison of light, time slowed. He saw memories of the Vutari in full, their birth from stellar nurseries, their guidance of younger civilizations, their betrayal, their fall. And now, their final host. He was their echo, their last ember. And as the chamber sealed behind a wall of impossible physics, Dante knew one truth more clearly than anything. He would never leave this place. Not as the man he was, but perhaps as something else entirely. The Helios 7 was no longer a ship. It had become a mausoleum of stars, a tomb floating at the edge of existence. The hull groaned under pressures not meant to be survived. Systems failed one by one, but no alarm rang. There was only silence, the kind that comes before the end. And in that silence, something pulsed. Dante's signal, or what remained of him, echoed across subspace like a forgotten prayer carved into the bones of the universe. It wasn't a distress call. It was a memory. A warning. Within the core, time fractured. Reality folded in on itself as Dante, now the hybrid synthesis of man and stellar consciousness, stabilized the dying star for just one more cycle. Enough to delay collapse, enough to send a final message. Do not come for us. The voice carried no hostility, only gravity, only truth. Beyond the event horizon of logic, the Mirax hesitated. Their instruments could not decipher what they were seeing. A life form, a machine, a prison, a god, whatever it was. It wasn't salvageable, and it was watching them. Dante, now fused with the will of the Vuthari, had become something singular, a gatekeeper to a secret not meant for the living. And in that moment, with the last vestiges of his humanity flickering like sunspots, he chose the only path left. He let go. The magnetic fields collapsed. The core folded, and the Helios 7, swallowed by the dying breath of the star, disintegrated into pure radiant memory. But something remained. Not a body, not a structure, a presence. Hidden deep in the quantum scars of space, nestled between collapsed light and fractured sound, a whisper still exists. It travels between solar winds, encoded in plasma and dream. Listen, before it's too late. No one knows if it's Dante, or the Vuthari, or something entirely new. But across deep space transmissions, in broken signals and distorted recordings, fragments of the whisper keep returning, to colonies, to mining crews, to ships passing near dead stars. A single phrase, almost forgotten by time. The core remembers, and the universe, whether ready or not, is still listening.